Hello, everyone. A very warm welcome to another exciting episode of Psychology Talks. And today we're going to discuss how you can master the art of learning. And as you know, that learning is a lifelong process. And the more you learn, the more you get to know that you don't know much about it. So each and every time you learn something, you need to evolve. You need to continuously change your learning practices, change your learning strategies to learn more, to be to grow faster, to grow quicker. So this is kind of an art and a science which sometimes people don't know, and they think that they are learning, but they somehow get stuck in the learning where they cannot learn anymore. So there are many ways to learn more efficiently, more effectively. Sometimes you have to unlearn to relearn. Sometimes you have to think from a very different perspective that how you can learn something more. So there, this is, as I mentioned, it is an art and it is a science to learn so you can grow more effectively and more efficiently. And that's why I have invited our guest today, Dr. Gina Anderson. She is the award winning founder and CEO of Luma Brighter Learning, an instructional design and a learning company. She routinely publishes new, measurable, science based techniques specifically focused on adult learning to help companies improve their safety score and uphold compliance. She is also the author of Teaching Without a Teaching Degree, Luma Learning Lessons. She has received numerous business awards, and she is the guru of teaching that how you can make learning more effectively. So let's welcome Dr. Gina Anderson. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it is such my pleasure. I am so glad to be here with you today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I mean, it is an honor. I've been actually looking forward to speak to you on this topic. This is a very topic that is close to my heart.
Yes, it's such an important topic for us to discuss today.
Yeah. So, I mean, I gave a little bit of introduction about you,
Mhm.
but tell us about yourself to our audience that how you came into this field, why this topic is so close to your heart.
Yes, well,
So,
yeah, definitely. Thank you for that. So, I'm very passionate about studying how we all learn because when I started my career, I was a special education teacher. And what I realized very early on in my career is that everybody is taught in the same way. And many times we are taught in a way that we were taught, and that research shows that. And what we realize when we study the brain and really how our minds are made up is that each individual learns in a different way. And in fact, but we deliver instruction to everybody in the same way, the same time, in the same format. And even across cultures, I was saying if you and I were in the
yeah,
same room, a teacher might teach us the same way. But why I'm passionate about this is because I actually train truck drivers now. In truck
wow,
drivers and semi trucks, the difference between learning and not learning is coming home alive or not alive to your families. And so
yeah.
it's critical that we meet their needs where they're at. And so that's really why I'm passionate about it.
Yeah, I mean that's interesting, and as you're absolutely right that people don't learn the same way because everyone is
Mhm.
unique. They have different interests, they have different backgrounds, and unfortunately, people actually train them the same way, and
Right.
it's not as effective. I mean, if and it can give so much better result if they actually customize the learning as per their aptitude, as per their interest, as per their cultural background. So
Mhm.
that's really interesting. So tell us a little bit more about how you make or how you customize learning to bring more or better results.
Yeah, exactly. So when I think about learning and I think about how to customize learning, we want to
Mm-hmm.
think about it in different ways. You can think about learning, whether a lot of times when people think about teaching someone, they think about learner to content. But in
Yeah.
fact, there's actually different ways: learner to teacher, learner to self, learner to learner. And then in
Yeah.
fact, this is same time learning. You can do same time learning, or you can do asynchronous learning, which is not same time learning. But the real exciting thing is that what we're learning today with new technologies like artificial intelligence and looking at our minds and how they work is we've talked a long time. This is like probably going on, I don't know, 30 decades. I don't even know. That's a long time. With differentiating learning,
Yeah.
it's not a new concept. But how
Yeah.
do we do that? And so today, with new technologies coming out, we're able to bring in real world information like crash statistics, or you can bring in information from vehicle statistics. You can take data, bring it into the technology to be able to implement individualized learning plans to individuals. And you can do this with children too. When we talk about, I know we're going to talk about people who have had barriers to learning. What we find is that you can't deliver the same way in the same methods with the same content to everyone.
Yeah.
You know what? How they train truck drivers? Do you have any
Um,
idea? Do you
no, not really.
so
Not really.
in trucking, with how they've been training a truck driver that's driving a huge semi truck,
Yeah.
they're training
Okay.
them with videos. That's how they're training them.
Oh.
And so,
Oh.
if all truck drivers, that's how they're learning, they're going to
Yeah.
go out into a giant semi and
Mm-hmm.
they may kill someone or kill themselves if they're not
Yeah.
getting individualized learning, hands-on learning. And
Absolutely.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean that's really interesting because this is like they need to know that what exactly their way of learning, and then it is much better. I remember that once I was with the company, and I did conduct a focus group discussion, a
Uh-huh.
research for the truck driver, and
Ah.
yeah, it was, but then the research was about the tea, because in the country they
Uh-huh.
usually have the long basically routes to run and drive for even
Mhm.
the late during the late night. So
Oh,
they
right.
excuse me, so they drink a lot of tea or a
Oh,
coffee to stay awake. And I remember
wow.
done this research to find out what exactly
Right.
do
Right.
it, because
Oh, no.
they needed they wanted to they needed to keep the attention very like,
Oh,
and
yes.
the main problem with them, I remember when I was conducting that research, it was
Mhm.
that when they're going on a highway, nothing changes, especially in the night, because the
Yeah.
road is also lonely, nothing. So
Right.
it's the kind of the when they actually driving, they tend to
Uh-huh.
lose the focus, and
Right.
especially when they are driving for so long, they get tired and they
Mhm.
can't do it. So I mean, that
Mhm.
was one thing that I
Right.
recall from my research.
That's so true. I love that research that you're
Yeah.
finding because, distracted driving is something that's so important. And, you can look at it is, do they know the skill? Are you training and you understand the brain of how to train them so that they remember the skill? Or are you trying to change a behavior? Those are two
Yeah.
different ways of training or trying to teach. But if you're looking at changing behavior, like if you're using your cell phone, I hope to goodness you don't drive and text or text and drive.
Yeah.
But you look
Absolutely.
around, here I run and people are texting and driving. They know cognitively, they know
Yeah.
not to text and drive, but they're doing it. So now we got to use methods of changing behavior. And really, what we have
Yeah.
to understand is how our brains work, our capacity for learning. And
Hmm.
we do have cognitive limits when we study the brain. Even if I'm jumping up and down and dancing and I want
Hmm.
you to learn, it doesn't necessarily mean, number one, that you're
Yeah.
ready to learn, or that I have your attention to learn, or that you
Yeah.
have the capacity to learn. So all of those things are things that I'm super passionate about teaching other people about, so that they
Hmm.
can retain that content. Because that driver that you mentioned that's trying to drink coffee or tea to stay
Yes.
awake, his mind is going to wander probably even less than 8 seconds.
Yeah,
It only
absolutely.
takes a split second to get in a car accident and kill somebody.
And that's true. That's true. Okay, so now, like, if we talk about, like, learning and how we can master the art of learning.
Mhm.
So, what exactly are the barriers which stop someone from learning?
Yeah, so when I think about this, so I think about the dimensions of learning and the dimensions of, and you can kind of tie them into the dimensions of wellness. First of all, if you think about the physical aspect of learning or the physical aspect of yourself, you could have physical barriers that are going to prevent you from engaging in learning. That's kind of the first barrier that somebody may have to overcome. The second one is maybe an intellectual barrier. You know, we're born with our human brain, and you can be born with limits to capacities to learn. There could be intellectual barriers that you have to overcome to be able to learn. You could have emotional barriers. Think
Yeah,
of people that have trauma. There was a recent study done in July, and UCL researchers really pointed out that if you have early trauma, and a lot of your guests, they talk about trauma and how to overcome that, but from learning, you could have trauma that impacts the way your neurons connect, which could then influence how you're trained, whether you're female or male. There could be differences. You could have social barriers, maybe, and I can talk
yeah,
about some people who've overcome barriers, but maybe there's somebody that's been in your past that said you can't do this, and so
yeah,
maybe there's some social barriers, or maybe you like learning with people, but you live in an isolated environment, so you could have social barriers. There
yeah,
could be barriers, financial barriers. People with limited resources have limited access to education, limited access to resources. So definitely financial barriers. There's also barriers related to kind of your environmental, or so your cultural barriers,
yeah,
and really what those present to you. And then another barrier I like to think about is vocational barriers.
yeah,
Sometimes you're kind of stuck in a position and there's nowhere more to grow. And so there could be vocational barriers.
yeah.
There's lots of barriers that come
Yeah.
in to impact learning.
Absolutely. I mean, this is the very true that there's so many barriers which can actually restrict our growth, restrict our learning. So, how can one actually identify that these barriers are restricting their growth and how they can actually overcome? So, these kind of like two questions: how to identify and how to overcome these barriers.
Yeah, I think if you have found yourself stuck, like in you're struggling,
Hmm.
whether it's struggling, like if you're having trouble reading, like that would be an intellectual barrier. But maybe
Okay.
you don't feel a fire inside of you to learn, or maybe
Hmm.
you don't have an attention to learn. You can really think in and look inside when you're struggling and you're not happy. Learning is directly tied to happiness. I know we
Yeah.
all know this. And so if for some reason you're not feeling happy, if you've lost passion, that could be the first sign that you're maybe there's a barrier that you're facing. And so what I like to think about is if you're feeling lost, you feel like you've lost hope, maybe
Yeah.
you're feeling depressed, there are strategies to help you get back on track, to help you with your learning. And so each of those barriers that I talked about, there are specific strategies. We could do 3-hour podcasts talking about getting over those. But
Yeah.
but the one thing that I would say is the first step, I'm going to give you five ways of really stepping in back in. And I call this having a mind of a champion. I'm very passionate
Okay.
about the
Wow.
power of
Yeah.
your mind. So the
Yeah.
first thing is you have to have courage. It's scary to know you have a barrier. It's
Yeah.
scary.
Absolutely. It's
It's
exactly.
scary to know that. So you have to find courage, and that comes from deep inside of you. You
Yeah.
have to make the step forward in your mind. Your mind controls that to find the courage. The second thing is practice. If you think of who's your favorite sports hero? Do you have a favorite sports hero?
My favorite sports hero. I mean, I used to do a lot of, like, this. The Ronaldo is one I know. Like,
Oh,
I'm a good fan. I'm a fan of soccer. So
soccer.
yeah, yeah,
That's
I
a great
really
one.
like.
So think of that
So,
soccer. So I think soccer, if you need a lot of practice to be good at it. So if you have
yeah,
courage, you need practice. You're going to have to hit a billion soccer balls When I grew up, I didn't have a lot of resources. I had a wooden tennis racket, and I hit a lot of tennis balls. You're going to have to hit for it to be automatic recall when you're under stress, when you're stressed and or under a really critical event that you have to recall the content. You have to have it down as like brushing your teeth. It has to be
Yeah.
automatic. So practice. So find courage, you practice, and then you really have to focus and believe. So you have to
Yeah.
visualize in your
Yeah.
mind the ability to do that. I mean, this is something that you have to practice. It doesn't just come. You have to be able to take your mind and focus it forward and believe. Tell yourself, if you're telling yourself you can't, that's 10 times more powerful than telling yourself you can. Say
Yeah.
I will and I can out loud. That's definitely important. And then the fourth step is building resilience and grace when you don't succeed. Because I'll tell you, if you're
Yeah.
practicing and practicing, and you're bound to have a setback. It's just
Yeah.
part of the process, right? You're going to
Yeah.
have a setback. So you got to give yourself grace. You have to have grace. And then the last thing I'd say is to overcome a barrier is to celebrate your small wins,
Yes.
because you're not going to feel happy at the end. At the very end, you're going to feel happy, but then that happiness goes away. So you have to
Yeah.
celebrate every time you're practicing all those small wins. That
Yeah.
helps you overcome a barrier to learn.
Oh my God, this is so, like, you explained so beautifully, and especially when you say that, like, the mind is the only or the ultimate powerful thing we
Mm,
have.
mm,
I mean, I couldn't agree more on that,
mm,
because this is, I mean, in the entire universe, the only thing that is that has the ultimate power is our mind, and nothing else is more powerful than this. So yes, I agree
I,
with you this that. And you said that, like, you need to have a courage. That's, I mean, that is the main barrier people feel, that
mhm,
that they don't accept that they have any barrier.
mhm,
And that comes when they actually get so comfortable in their own zone, and they
mhm,
think that whatever is happening is perfectly fine, and their own fear to go out and learn actually stops them from moving on or to grow further. So I mean, I absolutely love the way you define it. And the 5 points is actually, I think that this is the philosophy of life that you actually
It
said.
is. I think
I
so. I wrote this.
seriously,
I'm very passionate about building the mind of a champion. I feel
yeah,
that we all have chemical neurons that make up our
yeah,
minds that do hold us back. And so don't be hard on yourself. Tell your brain, stop it, knock it off. Like, I want to
yeah,
move forward. You have to tell your brain that. You need to say it out loud. You need to tell, you think about having your bad brain and your good brain on your shoulder.
yeah.
Tell the bad brain you're not listening to it. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And especially the one that when you said that visualize, especially, I know that, especially that when we actually visualize, or when
Mhm,
we imagine, like, our mind cannot differentiate between what is
mhm,
reality and what is imagination. And when we visualize, when we practice, our mind activates mirror neurons, which actually creates the same kind of sensation in the body that we go through when we're doing any physical activity. So I mean, I've seen the documentaries, and I've also
mhm,
read some books that, especially
mhm,
people who are like doing gymnastic or some kind of
mhm.
sports, they do actually visualize before actually performing that act, because that
Exactly.
actually trains their body before actually going through the event or through the activity itself. So
Mhm,
that's the amazing power we have when we visualize. It does not only affect us spiritually, mentally, but it actually prepares us physically as well to encounter any event that we can imagine. So yes.
Well, I'm very passionate about it too. It's
Yeah.
definitely true. If you're training for anything, if you're trying to learn anything, if you're trying to master a test, like your son, he has to go in and he has to do a test. You have
Yeah.
to know and visualize all the answers and know exactly and feel so comfortable that it's a routine. We don't think about brushing our teeth. We don't think
Yeah.
about that. That's how learning should be. And the way we do that is exactly our brain chemicals are made up in a way that we have to activate the neurons and keep those connections strong so that we will remember. And
Yeah.
that's critical for
That's
learning.
Yeah, yeah. So, like, my next question is basically that people develop the learning and they learn, and then, as you said, like when we brush our teeth, we don't like we do it so automatically that we
Right,
don't need to think about it.
right,
But sometimes that kind of learning
right,
also it stops us, like
right.
because that sometimes we need to unlearn our like belief that are stored maybe wrongly or that becomes outdated. So how what are the strategies you suggest that how we can unlearn those behaviors or
Yes.
unlearn those learning?
So I'm going to use an example of a pre-trip inspection for a truck driver, and you can apply this like for anything that you're trying to learn. So when you think about a driver and you're getting in your car, we even think about everyone probably drives. You get in the car, you put the key in, and then you start to drive, and your mind starts to wander. And so the idea is that you have to continually activate your brain and be in tune with your brain. So it's almost like having a conversation with your brain as you're going through different routine items like doing a pre-trip inspection. So when you have a routine, the first strategy I would say is have a continual conversation with your mind. So you always have to be in tune with your mind, so
Yeah.
that you know exactly what you're doing. If you're not in tune in your mind and your mind is thinking about dinner and you're driving, or you're thinking about the fight you had with someone that you love and you're driving, that keeps you from progressing forward with that task. And like you said, you could develop bad habits from that. Secondly, and if you're in tune with your mind, it's finding those resources that are going to help you move forward. You offer, I'm just going to use this as an example, your podcast that you offer, there's tons of free, open, the world is open.
Yeah.
You're in Saudi Arabia, I'm in the United
Mhm.
States, across different, like,
Yeah.
we're so far away. We can
Yeah.
learn from people, we can learn
Yeah.
from internet resources. There are billions of apps on the phone. The learning is at our fingertips. So if
Yeah.
you need to relearn something, don't become complacent. That's called complacency. When you stop
Mhm.
learning, you become complacent. And that's when these things happen, whether it's a critical accident or maybe you lose touch with loved ones. But you have to continue to seek out these resources that align with your passion. And I
Yeah.
always say this, you have to find what sets your soul on fire.
Yeah.
If it sets your learning sets our souls on fire, right? And so
Yeah,
we're going
absolutely.
to constantly looking at other perspectives to help our growth.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, especially when we need to see that are we doing things that on continuously on like automated basis or
Mm-hmm.
we are doing something new. So that's
Mm-hmm.
one thing that tells us that when we need to do something more to it to learn or to unlearn and then
Mm-hmm.
relearn. So that's wonderfully you explained.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing that I always wonder that when we sometimes we try something and sometimes when we especially when you say that learning when we are learning things which sets our soul on fire, that's
Yeah,
really easy. Yeah, then we can spend hours and hours, but
right.
something that we actually
Yes.
don't
Don't
like.
catch. Yes.
How to actually do
Oh,
that, that's the
yes.
main dilemma.
Yes. All right. So this is what I say because this happens all the time in my business. We have
Yeah.
there's stuff that you have to know for
Yeah.
critical events, and there's stuff that you love to know. And
Yeah.
so what I say is when you're training someone something that they don't want to learn,
Yeah.
it's hooking in that into their motivations for learning in the first place. So if they have to learn it, for example, in trucking, they have to know how to do, like, let's say, I don't know, like I was using pre-trip inspection. But what if they don't want to learn how to do that? Well,
Yeah.
what if they're motivated? Maybe the motivation, you have to look at the motivation. Is the motivation for them to do it in the first place because they need a job? Is it a financial motivation? Or maybe they want to do better. They want to do better because they want to do better for their family. And so maybe it's a kind of a personal motivation. And so if you don't want to learn it and you have to learn it, you have to hook into your own
Yeah.
motivation and what that is, so that you would even want to look at it in the first place. And so what we recommend is assigning content or assigning learning that is attached with something that learners want to learn. So the key is you have to assess your learners in the first place to know what they want to learn. And that's
Yeah.
not even being done half the time. We don't know what people want to learn. So
Yeah,
we did a
actually.
research study. This was really interesting in 2020. Actually 2023, I did a wellness and I asked the drivers, what do you want to learn? And guess what they said? What do you think?
Yeah.
What do you think they
Um,
said?
they let me think that if they want to learn, like they want to learn anything about anything, or they want to learn about trucking.
Yeah, so anything. We asked them,
Oh,
what do you
anything.
want to learn? Mm-hmm.
They might be learning maybe sports or something.
Yeah, so what they said, it was amazing. They want to learn about kindness. They want to learn about
Oh,
not being
wow.
depressed. They want to learn about how to be away from their family and how to deal with that. They want to
Yeah.
learn, but that content or those topics aren't being assigned.
Yes.
Instead, what's being told to them, you
Yes.
have to learn how to be safe in your truck. Well, you know what? They already know. They've been
Yes.
doing that for 30 years. So why don't you give them a topic with that, or coaching about how to not be depressed? If you say, look,
Yeah.
I care about you, I want you not to be depressed, I want to work with you on that, and in conjunction with that, we also want you to be safe. So coupling
Oh.
what people don't want to learn, but you have to know what. How many times, anyone listening, if you asked, has anyone ever asked you, what would you like to learn? I mean,
Yeah, I
no.
mean this is such an important question. Actually, you know what? That's what I usually, and as I was discussing before this
Yes.
podcast, that there's a lot of discussion between me and my son, and that's
Yeah.
exactly my son was usually telling me that nowadays, like, the education system force
Yes.
them to
Yes.
learn something, and they
No,
never
never.
ask them what actually they really want to learn. And
Right.
there is the main dilemma, that
Right.
that people get, I would say, depressed or
Yeah.
stressed, because they've been forced to learn something which they actually don't like. And
Right.
as you said, that they need to find some hook or motivation.
Right.
And that is how, if we find out exactly what hook or what motivation they want, then
Mhm.
it will bring some excitement to them,
Right.
which can help them learn even if they don't want to learn. And I will
Right.
just give you one example. For example, that I always wanted to, I
Uh-huh.
mean, I like to learn about mind and sciences, and
Yeah.
and then the thing is that I wanted, but at the same time I also wanted to know about the universe. And my main, I wanted to be to do something like in the physics or something, like
Oh, good.
astrophysics or something.
Yes, yes.
But the main problem with me was that I hated math.
Yes.
And
It's like
I
Paul.
couldn't actually do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, it's
And
like
then,
Paul Gunn. Paul
yeah,
Gunn,
and
same thing. Yeah.
I don't like, and I couldn't. So I decided not to actually pursue my profession in physics. So I
Uh-huh.
instead, because I wanted to understand the mind also, so I went to
Yeah.
the psychology. But I love to read books about quantum
Yes.
physics and astrophysics and whatnot. So
Yes. Well,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
such an, and the thing is, the way schools are set up, and even adult education in
yeah,
everything, is like, if you put learners in pods, in not only the content, but the way the content is delivered.
yeah,
Maybe your son wants to learn on on the couch from his phone.
yeah,
Maybe he doesn't want to go
absolutely,
sit in a chair in a classroom in
absolutely.
all rows and learn that way. That's not how he
Yeah.
learns best. Like, let him learn on the couch,
Absolutely,
you know?
absolutely.
So
Yeah,
yeah, it's finding
that's
out
true.
how they want to learn, not only how they learn, but in what environments do they learn best.
Absolutely. And how
Mhm.
actually, what are the means? Because that's what my son says, that he learns the best
Mhm.
through, let's say, YouTube, and
Right.
through learning like from the
Mhm.
Google. and like he says that, it's quite boring to
Uh-huh.
learn what can be learned in 5 minutes. Like, is it like
Right.
we do in the classroom, the teacher talks about it for half hour, the
Right.
same thing
Right.
which they can actually
Exactly.
learn in 5 minutes through the
Oh my gosh,
YouTube.
you give me
So
goosebumps because that's my passion. It's like we deliver the
yeah,
content the same way, and
yeah,
it's like it's
absolutely.
just not how we learn. It's just
Yeah,
not.
that's true. That's true. I know, like we can go on
I
and on,
know. I know.
but unfortunately, the time is like, no, it's
We're
off now. It's
over.
like, so we're like, it will be past 30 minutes. So before I actually close the show, what one advice would you give to our audience today so they can enhance their learning?
Yes. So I would say this. I'll leave you with this thought. So harness your mind. Find
Hmm.
the item that sets your soul on fire
No.
and tell your mind that you can do it. You will do it and you can do it, and say it out loud and celebrate the small wins, because when you're winning every day through the small wins, then you're always winning. So
Yeah.
I appreciate you having me on today. You are a really amazing soul, and I'm so glad that we
Oh.
learned from each other.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's such a beautiful thought. I mean, especially your philosophy of learning in life is so much, intertwined that, when you learn this learning, you actually learn how to live a life. So this is amazing. And I'm glad that I had the chance to interview on my podcast, because
Thank
I'm
you.
sure our audience have also learned a lot from you. So, okay, what is the best medium they can reach out to you?
Yes.
You're
Yeah.
active on LinkedIn, and
Yeah. Yeah. Go to
yeah,
my LinkedIn, connect with me on LinkedIn. I have a website, learningwithgina.com. You'll find my
okay,
I Love Learning podcast. So if
okay.
anyone wants to be on my I Love Learning podcast, that's great too. So those are the ways you find me.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, I have already actually posted your website and your LinkedIn profile on the comments.
Super.
So yeah, so people can reach out to you. So thank you so much for joining us today. It was super amazing today, and I
Thank
learned a
you.
lot
Me too.
from you. So thank you so much for sharing beautiful insights. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank
Yeah.
you.
And thanks to all the audience who joined from across the globe, shared the comments, and made this session more lively. So thank you and have a great day.